All right, everybody, welcome back to another part of the lab series. In this series, we're going to be deploying computers again, but we're going to be deploying them with another tool called Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, otherwise known as MDT. We learned about WDS in a previous video, and WDS was great because it allowed us to easily deploy computer images over the network. Then in the following video, we learned how to customize those images, and now we're going to go one step further and know how to customize images while they're getting deployed. So looking back onto our deploy server, we're going to pull up a web browser and we're going to download Microsoft MDT and the Windows ADK. So you're just going to search for Microsoft MDT download, and you can see one of these first links. As of this date, the most recent version is 8.4.4.3. If you have a newer version, go ahead, feel free to use that. But we're going to stick with 8.4.4.3, and then while that's downloading, we're going to download the Windows 10 ADK. Okay, we can see that the current latest version for Windows 10 version 17.09 is available. There's versions for 17.03 and 16.07. I've been using the most recent version with older versions of Windows. For example, I've tried ADK 17.09 while deploying 17.03, and I haven't had any problems. If you're going to be deploying 17.09, you want to make sure you're using the latest toolkit. If you're using an older toolkit, you're probably going to run into problems. So I'm just going to go ahead and download the latest version of that. And we can close out of Chrome here, and then we'll pull up our downloads and begin the setup. So the first thing that you need to do is install the ADK. You're not going to be able to install MDT until the ADK is set up. So we're just going to double click the file, and we're going to pretty much select, for me in this lab, we're going to do the defaults. We're not going to participate in any kind of information. And then here we're going to check the deployment tools, Windows PE. You can keep the ICD checked in this particular. Yeah, let's actually go ahead and keep this checked for now. This will probably come in handy for a different video. And I don't need the Windows Performance Toolkit. It's not much space saving to not install it, but it's okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit install and pause the video while that's downloading and installing. All right, as you can see, the ADK has completed the installation. So now what we're going to do is we're going to begin the installation of MDT. MDT can technically be installed on any client operating system. It doesn't necessarily have to be Windows Server because all it is just, it's not like a server role or anything, but you'll see. I like to install it on my deployment servers just because that's the server doing the deployment. Again, I'm going to leave the defaults here for now, and I'm not going to join the experience improvement programs. And there you go. So now it's installed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up the deployment workbench. That is MDT. Okay, and then the next step that we're going to do is we're going to create a deployment share. I already had one on this computer, so I'm just going to go ahead and pretend like we did it. So I'm going to go ahead and select New Deployment Share, and we're going to do, whoops, because I didn't delete the previous folder. Yeah, it's okay. We'll just do Deployment Share 2, whatever. Okay, we're going to choose the default share name, which is Deployment Share. We're going to call it MDT Deployment Share. And then here's a couple generic questions that you could check or uncheck. We're going to be using a custom rule set, so none of these things really matter. So I'm going to hit Next. And there we go. This is now our deployment share. So now what we need to do is we need to import an operating system. In order to import the operating system, you can either give it your custom WIM file or a stock WIM file, or you can attach in like an ISO to the computer and just import that whole ISO. I already have a WIM file for Windows 10 Enterprise, and that's what we're going to use. So I'm going to go under Operating Systems, and I'm going to right-click and select Import Operating System. Here you can see that there are options that you can use. In fact, you can even use an image from WDS. Since I have WDS set up, we could probably just use that server. And as you can see, it's gone ahead and imported all of the operating systems that I have in WDS. This is great because it looks like it doesn't copy WIMs. You don't have like duplicated WIMs on your computer. So that's the first step. Now the next step, and what makes MDT really cool, is that after it installs the operating system, we're going to give it a set of tasks to do. And in this particular case, we're going to have it install applications. So we're going to go under applications, and we can see that by default there are none. So let's go ahead and download an application. So I like to do, let's do, for example, Chrome, Google Chrome. So let's find the, we're going to find the Chrome Enterprise Installer. This is the Chrome MSI file, which we can use to install silently. We could see that there's the Chrome MSI 64-bit, so we're going to go ahead and download that. Okay, then let's go ahead and download Notepad++. I like Notepad++ on all of my computers. So I'm going to go ahead and find that, which is the 64-bit installer right here. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to install 7-zip. And again, we're going to look for the MSI file. If your installer does not have an MSI file, it's okay. You just need to do some research and figure out if you can install that exe silently. Because the key here is having this all be automated. If your exe file is launched and it does not launch silently, you're going to have to click manually. And if you're deploying many computers, this could become a frustration. So anyways, now that we have these files, we're going to go ahead and delete the 2 that we already have installed. Now we're just going to create folders for these programs. So we're going to create Chrome, 7-zip, and Notepad++. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag the appropriate files there, and I'm going to give these an easier name. Okay, now we're going to go into MDT, back into Applications. We're going to right-click on Applications and select New. We're going to select Applications with source files, because what this is going to do is it's going to take those files and they're going to import into MDT, copy into MDT. If you select Application with source files somewhere else on the network, it's just going to do like a link. In my case, I don't have like a installer share, so we're just going to do you know, a copy. Now it's going to copy everything that's in that Google Chrome folder that I specified into MDT, and now I'm going to give it the command line that needs to run to install Chrome. And I know since it's an MSI file, I know we need to use MSI exec. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the other 2 programs. And as you may notice, the last application, which is Notepad++, is not in an MSI format. It's an exe format. But just by reading their website and seeing how to install that software, we can see that it supports a flag for this. So we'll do npp.exe/s for silent. Okay. So as you can see, now we have operating systems, and now we have applications. So the next thing to put this all together is we need to create a task sequence. A task sequence is, like it says, it's a sequence of tasks that are run to install your operating system. It could inject drivers, applications, and do any other kind of custom tasks like run command line scripts or PowerShell scripts. Right now, I'm not going to be adding any drivers because we're deploying in a virtual environment, but if you're deploying onto real computers, real hardware, you can go into out-of-the-box drivers and import your drivers. So now we're going to go under task sequences and create a new task sequence. I'm just going to call the ID 01, and we're going to call this Windows 10 Enterprise we're going to create a standard client task sequence. We're going to create we're going to select the appropriate operating system, and we're not going to specify a product key at this time. We're just going to give it some organization name, and we're going to specify the administrator password. Now, everything that you specified here can be changed later, so don't worry if you made a mistake. You don't have to delete and start over. You can change it later. Okay, cool. So now that we have the task sequence, we're almost ready to begin. Now I'm going to make a couple changes that I like to make into the rule set by right-clicking on MDT deployment share and selecting properties. Now I'm going to uncheck x86 because I don't want it to generate any 32-bit packages. So then I'm going to go under Windows PE, and under x64 I'm going to uncheck the generate ISO image. I'm going to be taking the file that MDT generates and importing it into WDS. So we're going to be working hand in hand, WDS and MDT. MDT is going to generate a WIM file. We're going to import the WIM file into WDS, and then we're going to network boot our computers, and that's how it all works together. If you check this box for generate an ISO, you can you can copy that ISO onto like a flash drive and take your computer, and as long as it has an internet connection, boot to that flash drive, and it will still load MDT. So the next step that I'm going to change is I'm going to take a look at these default rules. I'm going to pause the video here, make changes to the rules, and we'll continue so you can see what I did. Okay, as you can see, I've gone ahead and added a lot of different rules into here, and what essentially these rules do, they're pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to post these into the description of the YouTube video, and Microsoft provides quite a bit of documentation on what each of these do, but essentially I'm telling it to skip certain prompts so I don't have to answer a bunch of questions, and I'm providing it information on how to domain join the computer. So I'm giving it the lab domain name, I'm giving it the domain join user, the domain, the password, and the OU structure. And so when we look at the OU structure, if I pull up the domain controller, I could see that in the root of my domain, I have an OU called WDS. This is where I'm going to want all new deployed machines to go. Okay, and then under the bootstrap.ini file, again, we're just adding the deployer username and the password so that it can access that share. And this is extremely important because by default, I'm going to apply these changes. By default, the share permissions are pretty restrictive, and you have to be launching this as like a domain admin, and I don't really like doing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to find our deployment share, and we're going to change the permissions a little bit. I always change my permissions to be everyone under a share, and then I restrict it later in the NTFS permissions. So everyone is going to have full access for the share permissions, and then under the security permissions, we're going to go ahead and change this. So we're going to give ourselves full access to this folder. And now we're going to go ahead and give that deployer user, we're going to give it full control, or at least modify and read, write, all that stuff to this share. Because what's going to happen, MDT basically works by launching that pre-boot environment. It then tries to access this share and tries to run scripts from that share. So if you ever run MDT and you just get stuck at a screen that says Microsoft Deployment Toolkit and nothing happens, it's likely that you just don't have permission for that user that we specified in the rules to access the share. So I'm giving this user access to that share. I'm going to go ahead and apply these settings. And of course, we have some issues. When do you never not have issues applying permissions? It's likely because of the ownership. Just going to double check, and I'm going to replace. Okay, looks like it didn't like it because I didn't have domain admin or I didn't have myself in the permissions, but in any case, we could see that the permissions now are appropriate. They have me, so I have access to the share, and the deployer user that's going to be used to install. Okay, so now that that's done, we need to now generate these images. So I'm going to right-click onto MDT Deployment Share, and I'm going to select Update Deployment Share. And since it's the first time that it's running, it's essentially going to completely regenerate the boot images. Every time you make a change to your Bootstrap file or any of these settings, you're going to want to regenerate those images because these settings are baked into that WIM file. If you make changes to your task sequence or your applications or whatever, you do not need to regenerate those files because those are run live essentially. But if you add new drivers and you want your boot WIM to have those new drivers, you need to update your deployment share. So now I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to hit next, next. We're just going to wait for it to finish updating. Okay, we can see that the WIM files have finished generating, so we're going to select finish. And now here's the neat trick. We're going to go back to WDS. We're going to open up the boot images, and we're going to add a new boot image. And the boot image is going to be the one that we just generated out of MDT, which is by default, it's stored into your deployment share under the boot folder. And there we can see the light touch PE. So we're just going to next and wait for it to add. It just looks like it's going pretty fast. Okay, looks like that was added. So now we're going to go back to our client machine, and this virtual machine is set to network boot. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. Oh, it's likely I've making some changes and probably deleted some stuff. So okay. Yeah, there we go. My mistake. I just made some changes to that virtual machine at some point. Now we're going to go ahead and just network boot it, and you can see that light touch is now showing up as an option. So we're going to press that, and we're going to wait for it to load. And you can see after it loaded, we get brought into this MDT page. And as you can see, as soon as we got here, this blue box came up. If your deployment share permissions are not correct, you might be just stuck at this logo. And you can do some basic troubleshooting by hitting, I can't remember. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't remember. There's a command key you can press to open a command line window and essentially do some network troubleshooting to make sure that you're getting an IP address and stuff like that. But generally, I've noticed it's because of the shares. And now, as you can see, we get instantly brought into this window where we could select our task sequence. We have one task sequence, which is to install Windows 10 Enterprise, so we're going to select Next. It's going to ask us what we want to do. Do we want to join a domain or join a work group? And as you can see, if I join a domain, all of these things are pre-populated, like the OU and the username. Okay, I'm going to leave these all by the default, and now we're going to be brought to the application installation screen. I'm going to go ahead and check all of these and press Next. And as you can see, we're now getting this installed. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come back after Windows is done getting installed. All right, looks like Windows is almost done. Luckily, since the image is pretty small and it's a pretty quick network, it's just essentially copying like a 3 gig file or a 4 gig file onto here. So it should be pretty fast. And I'm going to unpause the video here so you can see how it works next and how it's essentially automated. You could see that it goes ahead and restarts the computer. And it's going to create the local admin user for us. And sometimes my Hyper-V has a problem where I have to close the console and reopen it. Just kind of exit out of those network services. And you can see we're booting into Windows. And basically, yeah, when you install Windows, you get brought into like a screen where you have to put in a bunch of information about your local user account and stuff like that. MDT takes care of all of that in the rules that we specified. Okay, and we're going to let that do its thing. Now I'm going to show you an interesting thing. In your MDT, when you expand your task sequence, and you go under Properties. Under Operating System Info, there's an untend.xml file. Okay, that's strange that we got that error. I'm not really sure what that means, but generally you press that button and you're able to see your XML file, and you're able to make all the changes necessary, like change the admin password and stuff like that. I'm sure this file lives, this unattend file lives somewhere manually, so you can open it with like a notepad or something, but essentially that's what's going on. And again, we need to close and reopen my console. And as you can see, it's going through the out-of-the-box experience automatically. And hopefully I typed all of the program switches correctly, because if I didn't, one of the programs can fail to install, like if I misspelled something. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the video until we're actually at the desktop. All right, and as you can see, we are now on the desktop, and in just a few seconds here, the MDT screen will come back up and it will continue working. And as you can see, we are logged in as the local administrator. Sorry, it's just kind of slow. I probably should have signed a couple more cores to this virtual machine. But as you can see, the MDT is going through its thing. It's installing applications. And yeah, there we are. We're logged in as the local administrator that we specified. I'm going to keep this thing going just so you could see that it works. And as you can see in the background, this Google Chrome icon appeared, and it looks like we're all set. And it looks like it blasted through the other two applications pretty quickly, which is great. Sometimes some programs take slower, pretty normal stuff. So if we open up the Start menu, we could see that 7-zip is installed, and the Windows 10 menu is just pretty horrible, but it's all there, and probably just need a reboot. So I'm going to go ahead and finish, because you could see that if completed with no errors. Oh, and the system seems to be domain joined. If we go back to our domain controller and refresh that WDS OU, there it is. That's the new computer. All right, so the computer is domain joined, and I just want to make sure that those 3 applications that we selected are there. I'm confident that they are there, but I just want to show you that everything is working as expected. All right, finally through that nice little video that I have to see every time. And you can see Notepad++ and 7-zip and Chrome are all there, and they're all working. Okay, so in this video, we essentially took WDS and we expanded it by installing MDT. With MDT, we were able to install an operating system image and applications on top of that image automatically. You can keep expanding that by creating even more custom task sequences, like activating Windows 10 automatically, injecting drivers, and stuff like that. So that's where MDT comes in and is useful, and I hope this video helped you.